It's now been well over a year since my first flapper collection video, and since then, I've done quite a few more videos covering flappers, so I knew I needed to make another one. Just like the last one, this contains articles from a variety of sources, mostly different newspapers, commenting on the epidemic of flappers in the 1920s, ranging from the laudatory to the critical. So bob your hair, roll up your socks, and get some chewing gum, because once again, here come the flappers. What is a flapper? Chickasha Daily Express, April 21st, 1922. Since the flapper has become of general interest, let us consider flappers. And since, as Socrates taught, the first requisite of philosophical discussion is to define terms, let us consider definitions. What then is a flapper? A newspaper questionnaire has brought forth these suggestions. Flapper is the modern term for a pretty young girl. A flapper is a cute, frivolous girl in the latest clothes. A flapper is a frivolous young person whose galoshes flap as she walks. I should think the term would be applied not to our attractive young girls, but to the old ones who are trying to look young. A flapper is a cute young thing with short skirts, bobbed hair, and sport Oxfords. A flapper is a girl making herself as attractive and cute-looking as possible so she can catch a beau. And so on and on without really getting anywhere. Socrates may have been justified in his frenzied quest for definitions, because in his day there were no dictionaries. A lexicon is always a shortcut to knowledge. Looking the word up in the century, we find this explicit and succinct statement. Flapper, a young bird when first trying its wings, especially a wild duck when it cannot fly. What more could anyone ask? And don't despair of the poor little flapper. Her feathers grow and her wings strengthen, and the poor little duck does learn to fly after all, you know. And eventually we find her a staid mother, worrying about a new generation of flappers. Reforming the Flapper. The Birmingham Age Herald, February 20th, 1922. Reprinted from the Montgomery Advertiser. What can we do to protect our boys from the depredations of the flapper? Was a question seriously discussed at a meeting held Thursday at the home of Mrs. Otto Kahn on Fifth Avenue, New York, in the interest of the Girls Protective League. The object of the League is to protect the old-fashioned girl and old-fashioned standards of virtue, but it quickly developed into a discussion of protecting the boys from the young vamps. I believe, said one speaker with an official position, the way to solve the problem of the young people today is to approach them through the boys. If the boys agree to boycott the girl who has violated the social code, she will soon mend her ways. I have asked the boys why they did not do this, and they always say that they are afraid the girls will not dance with them if they are too prim and old-fashioned, but it is nevertheless the boys who hold the power in their hands. The boy's social code of conduct is very much higher than the modern girls, and he is very much shocked by the way the girls act. We are a bit skeptical of the lady's premises, and we are unconvinced by her arguments. Her plan would shift a large responsibility upon the boys. We doubt their ability and inclination to meet it. Her plan, undoubtedly, would be effective if she could get organized action on the part of the boys for the boycott of the flappers. But getting united action from the boys is an impossibility. Some renegades, and we fear that their numbers would be large, would be certain to flirt and gamble with the flappers. The flapper has the usual feminine instinct. She knows whether the boys like her ways or not. The boys are not equal to the task of reforming the flapper. That needed job is the job for parents. If the boys thought she needed reforming, the flapper would cease to be. Another speaker at this same meeting said, and doubtless truly, in spite of appearances, that it was the manners and not the morals of the flapper that needed reforming. Most of her troubles were on the outside. While this was a fact, it was nevertheless true that the manners of her brother are much more conservative, and it is through her brother that we must approach her, said a speaker at the meeting. The boys are doubtless able to take care of themselves, but the job of reforming the flapper is beyond them. Flappers Protective Society organized for real protection. The Kenosha Telegraph Courier, May 11, 1922. Here are the planks in the platform of the Flappers Protective Society, the flapper principles that must be protected. Bobbed hair, rolled socks, independence, smoking in public, no shifter language, no leaning vine tactics, snuggle parties if desired, liberalism combined with propriety, clothes worn in conformity with individual taste. A fig for convention and a fig for dress, if one cares. That's the motto under which Chicago flappers have banded together into the country's first Flappers Protective Society. Miss Margaret Purcell is president of the Chicago Local, which is laying plans for national representation in the principal cities for the purpose of mutual protection of flapper principles. Immediately after forming and getting underway their flapper organization, Miss Purcell and her flapper compatriots started hot and heavy after dissenting opinion launched from the city's numerous Sunday pulpits against them. They called on Mayor Thompson in a body and wrote letters to their congressman demanding that antagonistic flapper propaganda be stopped. "We're neither fools nor young indiscreets," says Miss Purcell, who besides being flapper president also holds title to the honor of flippant flapper, the highest flapper recognition. "These silly people who are denouncing us are making a big mistake. They fail to comprehend that this is a new day and age, and that young girls are merely trying a means to express themselves in a decent, sane manner in keeping with the times. And right now, I want to define a flapper. Lots of grown-ups think she is a girl with plenty of speed and some control, but that isn't so. A flapper is just a 20th century woman who is honorable and courageous. She prefers doing what she does do in the open, and not behind people's backs. We stand, all of us, for moral living, but we also think that many of the present-day conventions are obsolete and should be discarded." Just now, Miss Purcell and her cohorts are angry. "We've been lied and lied about," they say, "so please tell the world that we're out in earnest this time, and mean to show it." All of the 24 members of the society in Chicago agree with Miss Purcell. They take the organization and intent of their society seriously, and are pushing vigorously to extend it to other cities. The Origin and Rise of the Flapper. The New York Tribune, July 23, 1922. The patient public has been enlightened as to the habits of the flapper, but no one has attempted to explain whence came this new genus. Did the flapper just grow to blossom in 1922? Banish the thought. The flapper has been with us for more than 3 centuries, according to philologists. In 1726, history first makes definite mention of the flapper. Swift, in his Gulliver's Travels, says, "The absent-minded philosopher of Laputa always kept a flapper in the family, whose duty was to strike gently the mouth of him to whom the speaker addressed himself. The flapper was then something to arouse memory. It was in this sense that Lord Chesterfield, in the year 1747, wrote in a letter, I write you by way of a flapper, to put you in mind of yourself. Until 1852 did the flapper serve as a meek daily reminder. A writer in Blackwood's magazine expressed the opinion of that day in his remark, "It is an advantage to have a flapper about us to remind us of our faults." But the vicissitudes of time brought a change to flapperdom. A quarter of a century later found the flapper an object used to shoo away flies. Always with looseness as a characteristic, soon many things which were noticeably flat and loose began to be spoken of as flappers. Even the long shoes worn by Negro minstrels earned the title. There is no missing link in the evolution of the flapper. In 1888, the term was applied to a young duck which tried to fly. Here, evidently, is the maternal grandmother of the would-be high-flying flapper of today and of tonight. At the beginning of the 19th century, more particular instincts of the flapper began to be developed. Any loose part of an animal which flapped was a flapper. In the Museum of Natural History, the flapper of a porpoise on exhibition is shown to remind flappers whence they sprang. When, several years later, a man accosted a friend and said heartily, "Give us your flapper, old man," he was not asking him for his lady fair. He was merely offering to shake hands. The flapper did double duty for a while, and took on the work of an intransitive verb too. To flapper meant to walk with a loose flapping motion. It also meant to quiver and to flutter, which can all be noted in the flapper today. And of course, it is a verb of the active voice. So active that it brings before us the 20th century flapper, the 1922 8-cylinder 2-earring model. The flapper's versatility is due to her experiences in so many forms of life. Her walk and the loose waist are second nature from the days she was part of the porpoise. She still does duty as a daily reminder. She can still chase away flies, birds, and others who prey, even gift-bearing animals. The flat shoes, erstwhile pride of minstrels, are even condoned, as is likewise the boyish grip of the flapper that only she can give. It's all part of her original nature, combined with the forces of her environment. She is the evolution of a type which has been in the making 300 years. Flaps for the Flapper. The Omaha Morning Bee, August 4th, 1923. Spalding, Nebraska. To the editor of the Omaha Bee. Through your column, I take the privilege of offering a plea in defense of the flapper. A girl from the age of 16 to 20, her hair bobbed, face powdered and rouged, lips painted. In general, they are most always good-looking. The most are game sports. They dance, smoke, and put on parties. They talk of sheiks, cake eaters, my man, aggravatin' papa, and many titles for their boyfriends or escort. They openly discuss life with the opposite sex, and without an evil, impure thought in their mind. The older people, parents, and even big sisters and brothers are shocked when they hear the flapper sis talk of getting a kick out of this or that, of getting hired out, too much wine, and many of their favorite expressions. If they dance all night to music of the saxophone with its jazzy or weird wail, are they any worse for it? Thinking of good times, getting the kick out of life, and not taking life serious, they are condemned, termed a rotten bunch, and wondered where they will end up at by gossips and narrow-minded people. The question is, are we such a rotten bunch? I say we, I being a flapper. Should we think deep into every move, act, or deed we do, and look for evil in it? Youth is supposed to be beautiful. Why in this modern day is it condemned, wondered at, and talked of even from the pulpit in an effort to reform it? Why don't they try to understand it instead of reform it? We don't do anything wicked or wrong. Of all the flappers I know, which is many, there isn't one who is immoral. often venturing near the forbidden line, but they never cross. Thanks to the few that approve of us or overlook our childish folly. Keep on our side, stick up for us. It helps us over the bumps. We will come out a fine, clean gang after all the criticisms. If there were more boosters instead of knockers for the flappers, we wouldn't try to shock the elderly people. MRF, a flapper of 18. Faye King gives tip to bobbed hair flappers. The Washington Times, June 30th, 1922. The bobbed hair flapper certainly knows what to do with her legs, as she stalks around with them, shod in comfy stockings and wide-toed, low-heeled shoes. But she doesn't seem to know what to do with her hands, and so out of sheer awkwardness and nervousness, she is all the time combing her hair. That's all right, but she doesn't seem to stop and think that no matter how nice and clean and fluffy her hair may be, there are bound to be some loose hairs that fly in the face of people around her, and it certainly isn't sanitary or nice. Now, I'm sure our little flapper friend wouldn't do this if she would stop and think how unpleasant it is for the person next to her or in back of her to have her hair, pretty as it may be, falling all over them. I certainly am in favor of bobbed hair. It's the nicest, neatest, most comfy way to wear hair, and my own hair is bobbed. But I'd certainly like to wrench the pretty, dimpled pink neck of the little flapper who sits in front of me at a show or next to me in the subway and combs her hair in my face. She's such a cute thing, I hate to frown and be nasty about it. But by the time a dozen or more have combed their shorn locks over me, I look like I worked in an oriental rug factory. I can sympathize with them, because I know how good it feels to run a comb through my short locks and feel each hair, feathery and light and alive and cool. But just the same, when I feel like combing my hair, I go to a dressing room, or in a corner away from everybody. There's got to be a system, you know. No girl with bobbed hair should comb it at the table. Although I've seen them come into a restaurant, throw their hat on a chair, and shake their head like a Shetland pony. What would you think if a man shook cigarette ashes on your new dress? Well, it's just as bad to shake your hair on his suit. It's just thoughtlessness, and a bad habit that is easily overcome if you stop to think. Don't let's give people who like to pick on any innovation a chance to knock bobbed hair for such a silly reason as combings. I saw a flapper snap at a young mother the other day because her baby put its shoes against the flapper's skirt. A minute later, the flapper shook her head and combed her hair in the baby's face. Surely the mother had more right for complaint. A flapper should know better. Flapper flunked in college quiz. The New Britain Daily Herald, January 14th, 1927. San Francisco, January 14th. Modern college youths, when thinking in terms of matrimony, prefer old-fashioned girls. The flapper may be a satisfactory, good-time companion, but as a prospective wife, she is only a 7%er. This, at least, was demonstrated yesterday in a vote of 284 male students of the University of Santa Clara, south of here. In a questionnaire distributed by a student publication, the men were asked to state their preferences of types of girls for marriage purposes. The tabulation showed 284 students out of 500 filled out the blanks, with the following results. Preference expressed for flappers, 7%. For medium-mannered girls, 15%. For old-fashioned girls, 64%. Undecided, 14%. Some of the student comments written in on their ballots follow. I hope to marry someone as like my mother as possible. An old-fashioned girl. I have her all picked out. All I need is my college diploma and some money. A flapper. There are no more old-fashioned girls. If old-fashioned means sensible and level-headed, though bobbed, certainly. If there is an old-fashioned girl to be found, I'll marry her. I hope to marry a flapper, i.e. a nurse. Something in between a girl who is educated, good-looking, and has a rich dad. Flappers give me an awful pain. I want a good girl, but a live wire. Love knows no types. I'm waiting for love. Schoolgirl flapper gives teacher baby stare. The Washington Times, March 20th, 1922. The flapper has appeared in many roles. There is the flapper of the boulevards, the flapper of the screen, the flapper of afternoon promenades. Now meet the flapper of the schoolroom. Flappers are the bane of a teacher's existence these days, so say the erudites. Flappers have a new classroom trick, say the teachers. When they don't know their lesson, they now give the baby stare. Instead of standing up when they are called on and mumbling a few inarticulate words when they don't know the answer, they now sit demurely in their seats and just look sweet and unknowing. Why expect a flapper to be expected to know such difficult problems? What else can you expect, say the teachers, when parents permit such school attire? The dress seems to control the girl's thoughts. A flapper, for instance, bobbed hair, belted dress, and stub-toe shoes. An 82-year-old flapper. Perth Amboy Evening News, August 8, 1924. Winthrop, Massachusetts. It took a long time for Mrs. Elizabeth Doane to make up her mind, but when she saw her daughter and her daughter's daughter and her daughter's daughter's daughter bob their hair, she decided it wasn't too late for her to join the ranks. So at the more or less mature age of 82, snip snip, off came the tresses. Thus was made Winthrop's oldest flapper. Mrs. Doane's hair was unusually heavy for a woman of her age. The bobbing of her hair developed into somewhat of a celebration. Her bobbed-haired granddaughter wielded the scissors, while her bobbed-haired daughter and her bobbed-haired great-grandchildren looked on. She's glad it's over now. Bobbed hair is much more comfortable. It saves us all time hunting all over the floor for hairpins, she says. Youngest bob-haired flapper. The Indianapolis Times, August 18, 1924. The youngest bobbed-haired flapper in Indianapolis is the claim of Essie Maud, 7 weeks old daughter of Patrolman William Gillespie, 1604 Rembrandt Street. That little girl is surely going to keep me broke paying barber bills, Gillespie said. Why, I had to have her hair bobbed when she was 17 days old, and maybe you won't believe me, but the tresses had to be cut again when she was 6 weeks old. Mrs. Edith Gillespie, the mother, said she didn't know whether to let Essie Maud's hair grow or keep having it bobbed. The styles change so much, I can't tell how the women will be wearing their hair when Essie grows up, Mrs. Gillespie said. The little girl is playfully referred to by the neighbors as the bobbed hair baby of Bad Bill the burglar catcher. Pa pokes Ethel in the nose, objects to flapper habits. The Bisbee Daily Review, February 8, 1922. While not of a puritanical turn of mind, Joseph Miller today explained to Police Judge Truid that he was unable to stand the rolled stockings, bobbed hair, galoshes, plucked eyebrows, and painted lips of the modern flapper. He was charged by his wife with punching the nose of his daughter, Ethel, 16. "My daughter wants to be a flapper," he said. "She plucked her eyebrows. I made her stop. I won't let her bob her hair. She combs it so it looks like it was bobbed. I hate galoshes, rolled stockings, and painted lips. The judge reserved decision on the flapper, but fined Miller $5 and costs for striking his daughter. No more flappers. The New York Times, February 16, 1928. Explaining the changes in young people to their carping elders has recently been an important function of the calm and kindly among grandparents. When fathers and mothers swore or wept according to their various temperaments because a 16-year-old girl insisted on carrying her own flask and latchkey, a grandmother with an inconveniently long memory was likely to remark on similar shocking lapses in her son or daughter at that age. So many wise and tolerant preachers, philosophers, and writers have defended the youngsters that the world has just about reached the point where it is ready to accept all their eccentricities as harmless manifestations of the exuberance of youth. No sooner has this happened than the Junior League announces that such acceptance is unnecessary. In 35 cities, the flapper has been surveyed and found wanting. Investigation reveals not that she is lacking in certain desirable qualities, but that she has actually disappeared. Surely you have missed her. Who has seen in recent days this creature, described by the League as the typical post-war flapper? Her hair was furiously frizzled. Her smoking was overenthusiastic. Her chewing gum was too loud and too large. Her vocabulary was imported direct from the trenches. She was startlingly picturesque, and now she is no more. In her place is a delicately made-up young woman of great poise and dignity. She has selected a few attributes of the flapper for preservation: the latchkey, the lipstick, and the liquor. But she makes such discreet use of them that she is no longer an offense to the world at large. Instead of flaunting her freedom, she makes it more valuable by using it quietly. In assuring us of these changes, the Junior League tries to make it appear that this new flapper is a pleasanter person to have around. No doubt she is, but her parents will soon be complaining of her subtlety. In the good old days of the real flapper, a father knew at least what he had to contend with. Now he can't be sure whether his child is as sweet and gentle as she looks, or is a flapper in disguise. Flapper Bandit is legally dead, but girl shown court clemency dives in her place. The Casper Daily Tribune, March 25, 1924. Los Angeles, March 25th. The miracle of regeneration has been undertaken by the law. Gene Carlton, so-called Flapper Bandit, has been pronounced legally dead by the courts. Anna Johnson is born in her place. Judge Russ Avery of the Superior Court has given Anna Johnson, in place of Gene Carlton, her one chance in 10,000. And that means that the young woman must indeed be reborn and live a life so different that she will be expected to forget that Gene Carlton ever lived. The story of Gene Carlton is modern, intensely so, and has all the jazz that could be packed into the space of a few years by a girl in search of adventure and thrills. For months, there have been reports of young women bandits on the streets of Los Angeles, but these reports were usually of color thrown in by reporters in search of the unusual in their writings from police records. Nobody took the stories of flapper bandits very seriously in police circles, and certainly not the police themselves. It was a real surprise, therefore, when Jean Carlton, hanging from the balcony of a home in which a volunteer police officer had been slain in a duel in the dark with a burglar, dropped like a ripe plum into the arms of a policeman, and was found to be the very type of a flapper bandit. A fortunate train unwittingly furnished through the capture of the young woman led to Edward Carlton, just out of the Navy, and fixed upon him the crime of the killing of Special Officer Robert E. McGee, who did police work for the love of it, and walked boldly in upon Carlton at his work of burglary and was instantly killed by a shot from the dark. The flapper bandit was soon identified as Jean Carlton, the bride of the young burglar and bandit, and the police believed her story that it was her first adventure in banditry or burglary with her husband. Carlton was brought to trial on a murder charge before a mixed jury of men and women. It seemed almost certain that he would receive the death penalty, but because he was such a good-looking young man, some of the women jurors refused to vote to hang him, and he was sent to San Quentin on a life sentence. Jean Carlton was then brought to trial before Judge Russ Avery. She was adjudged guilty of manslaughter. Her attorneys said they would put in an application for probation, and it was then that Judge Avery said there was only one chance in 10,000 that the application would be granted. Saturday, the application came up before Judge Avery. The girl's history was recited to the court as showing her subnormal in mentality. Her escapades began about 3 years ago, when she took the name of Jean. It was an adventure in psychology. She figured in 2 elopements, she bobbed her hair, she began the use of rouge and cosmetics, developed a complex for jazz in all its forms, and finally became the bride of Carlton and a partner in his desperate venture into banditry and burglary. Judge Avery pondered this history of the girl, and finally decided to give her that one chance in 10,000, but under stern conditions that would bring her back to the normal life she deserted with her first change of name. "As you pass through that door," said Judge Avery, pointing to the door of the courtroom as the girl stood before him, "Jean Carlton will die. Born in her place will be Anna Johnson. In the years to come, you must remember that." Judge Avery then recited the conditions upon which he gave the girl a trial on probation. They were: change of her name from Jean Carlton to Anna Johnson, and never to use any other than the old-fashioned name of Anna. To live under the supervision of Mrs. McCracken, probation officer, in an institution. To let her hair grow. To stop using rouge, powder, and cosmetics. To forget jazz parties and cabarets. To learn housework. To keep herself neat and clean in the old-fashioned way. To communicate with her husband in prison only through Mrs. McCracken. These conditions of probation are to endure at least 10 years, and if they are violated, then the young woman is to be brought before the court for sentence to prison. Judge Ben Lindsey defends flapper movies. He says the screen is eliminating sex inhibitions. By Ruth Beery. Photoplay, November 1927. I believe that the overemphasizing of the sex episodes in the motion pictures of today is paving the way for teaching the much-neglected art of love. Judge Ben Lindsey looked me firmly in the eye across the breakfast table and reiterated his statement. Then the eminent Denver jurist, now in Hollywood, continued. From what I know of the intimate lives of girls and women in what are called sex cases among the unmarried and domestic relation cases among the married, I have become enthusiastic over the constructive possibilities of teaching the art of love. The motion pictures, in showing love scenes and depicting sex episodes, are hastening the day when sex will be neither a secret nor a sin. Sex has been made a secret and therefore a sin by deception. Because young girls have been taught by the conventions of their mothers and grandmothers that sex is secret, it has become to them sinful. From this lack of knowledge, youth has mistaken passion for love, infatuation for companionship, which is the basis of marriage. Do you think the so-called flapper picture is causing restlessness among our young people, as many claim, Judge? Absolutely. His answer was emphatic. Many of the pictures are as thoughtless and heedless as youth itself. They are undoubtedly creating much dissatisfaction with life. They are often untrue to life. So are many conditions in the school and the church untrue to the basic principles of life. But that does not mean that they are necessarily or permanently harmful. Clara Bow may be good or bad. She may be increasing the idea of flirting and easy infatuation, all of which may be a false impression for the moment. But if it is to bring the idea of love and sex from undercover, if it is opening the subject to all women, it may look wrong now, but it is to prove an eventual advantage. From the so-called flapper picture, I look for much good generally to the country. Of course, the movies can do more and will do more in this line than they are today. Pictures should show that pure sex attraction is not love, should prove that an infatuation of the moment is not permanent. Many of them do. Stage Madness is an example. Have you had any striking examples among the women who have come before you of the influence of the movies? He thought for a few moments before remarking, I had one case that showed how the world blames the movies for the indiscretions of women. In this instance, they nearly proved an innocent young flapper guilty just because she attended the movies. The judge waxed indignant. $400 worth of goods were stolen from a Denver department store. 2 women were arrested for the theft. One, a typical flapper of 19, the other a woman of 30 and the mother of 4 children. Both were identified by clerks as the ones who took the goods. Among the things taken were more than $60 worth of cosmetics. Not a trace of them had been found among either woman's possessions. Both were brought before me. The mother of the 4 children had an able lawyer. He put the young girl on the stand and she admitted that she was a constant attendant at the movies. The mother never went to the motion picture theaters. The older woman's lawyer stood up. You see, he shouted, she's the kind, and he pointed at the rouged, lipsticked flapper that runs to the movies and gets all the modern notions that are leading our women to hell. What would this woman, and he turned to the other defendant, want with lipstick, rouge, and mascara? This other admits she goes to the movies. She is the one whom you must search for the stolen property. The judge was dissatisfied with the results. Following his usual custom, he brought both women before him, one at a time, to his famous judicial chamber. The girl frankly admitted she was a flapper, but denied ever taking an article from anyone. The judge, I think from what he told me in that fascinating breakfast conversation, was inclined to believe her. He sent for the other woman. It is too long a story to go into details. But with that instinct of getting to the hearts of all people who come before him with the one remark, you don't love your husband, but you do love a certain traveling salesman, he opened the floodgates of confession. The mother had stolen the beautifiers to make herself attractive before her lover. The flapper had cared for the mother's children while she took the cosmetics, to lend her a little beauty. Of course, Judge Lindsey always camouflages his stories a little, so that the principles will not be recognized in the reading. But the essential facts remain unmolested. He concluded the narration, Yet I am convinced that a jury of 12 men would have sentenced the flapper, largely upon the evidence of her attending the movies. Incidentally, this girl's favorite pictures were those depicting the flapper and flapper actresses. No, the movies may be teaching the young girl to spend money on rouge, lipstick, and mascara, As the men spend it on shaving cream, hair tonics, and face lotions, I interrupted. He nodded. But it is teaching women to think about life. And just as you are unable to see the forest from a distance through the foliage which enshrouds it, so are we unable to see clearly the changes in civilization being brought about by the movies. They are many, but paramount among them is the teaching of the sex question, the opening of the way for correct instruction in the art of love, so sadly neglected before the innovation of the so-called flapper pictures. Flappers and Their Metaphors. The Great Falls Tribune, August 9th, 1922. Washington, D.C., August 6th. Just when Henry Mencken almost made slang look respectable, along comes the flapper to inject a complex into the American language. If you walk aloof from the flapper tribe, you may be peacefully unaware that there is an elaborate flapper patois, as much a part of the outfit of the snappy young thing as her roll tops, sport hat, and sweater. Like the uniform, the language of the flapper is peculiar to her type. The only exception is that the flapper language is also spoken by the cake eater and other male contemporaries of the modern girl. To the rest of the population, including almost everyone over 25 years, flapper talk comes close to being incomprehensible. Not many of the terms are in general use. Few full-fledged adults, for instance, would be able to use correctly in their flapper meaning tomato, egg, potato, mustard plaster, lemon squeezer, squirrel, berries, alarm clock, and flat tire. These are perfectly respectable English words in their established sense. In flapper language, they are used as metaphors. Some are apt, while others seem forced. Flat tire is certainly an expressive term for a maidenly flapper over 30. Alarm clock, for chaperone, is not far-fetched either. Chaperones nowadays are about as popular and as little heeded as the family sleep chaser. A mustard plaster is listed in one flapper vocabulary as an unwelcome guy who hangs around. Lemon squeezer is flapper for elevator, though the term might be applied equally well to a streetcar or crowded automobile. The agricultural terms are the hardest to unravel. Why a brainless girl who is pretty and dances well should be a tomato is not explained. Nor is it perfectly clear why a youth who lets his girl pay her own way should be an egg, unless perhaps such a person is considered hard-boiled. It is true that to call a person an egg has a faintly insulting sound, even if the meaning is unknown. But the same might be said of most agricultural terms. Yet the meaning that we associate with them may make them seem complimentary. Peach and pippin have long been used to express praise. On the other hand, lemon, fish, and purple cow carry a meaning of disparagement. A potato in its latest sense is the male prototype of the tomato, a brainless boy. To add to the confusion, squirrel becomes a verb in the new usage and means to hide. Flapper jargon seems to be somewhat different from the slang that ordinarily enlivens everyday speech. The ordinary slang phrase is the happy or unhappy thought of some wit. If it fills a need, replaces some dull abstraction by a vivid mental picture, then it becomes popular. In time, it is either worn out by too much use and discarded, or it becomes respectable English, recognized by the solemn makers of dictionaries. The flapper talk appears to be an attempt to do a wholesale job, to turn the entire English vocabulary of youth into picturesque and sporty patois. Let no noun or verb remain undisguised seems to be the slogan of flapper, organized and unorganized. New terms are being added every day by earnest, gum-chewing young philologists. An interesting tendency in the new jargon is the use of proper names, in the way that hooverize was used during the war. To be put through a questionnaire is to be Edisonized. To be on time for a date is to Houdini. The analogy of this last is apparently that punctuality is considered a striking achievement. By the same sort of association, a girl's new dress is called her urban set. Trotsky comes in for a touch of this sort of fame, but he is not taken seriously by the language makers. A Trotsky is an old lady with mustache and chin whiskers. One reason that flapper talk remains so peculiarly the property of the flapper is that the vocabulary is restricted to the social interests of extreme youth. It is as specialized as the argot of the stage, sport, or politics. Almost all the flapper words are descriptive of beaux, dancing, parties, clothes, marriage, money, automobiles, and petting. Petting, which was itself slang, is now too tame and too much of a glittering generality for the flapper language. Puppy cuddling has partly replaced the word petting, and a whole assortment of terms refer to this activity in its various aspects. Thus, a moving picture auditorium becomes a petting pantry. The affectionate type of flapper is biscuit or a cuddler. A petter who likes to hang on a boy's neck is a necker, and a necker of the male species is a snuggle pup. The non-flapper element of the population has small place in its vocabulary for such terms, and so they do not become general property. All over the country, however, the language of the flapper is similar. The newest phrases travel by letters, by word of mouth, and in lists occasionally printed in magazines and newspapers. One magazine devotes its pages entirely to the interests of the tribe. A few phrases that have possibilities for use in the conversation of the general public have become popular American slang. There always seems to be a demand for slang tags to express greeting, approval, disapproval, and to replace a simple yes or no. Just now, the flapper and Slang Talking America as well refers to anything pleasing as the berries. The weird natural history allusions, that's the frog's eyebrows, or the bee's whiskers, or the duck's quack, or the snake's hips, and the rest, used to express approval, are also epidemic. Anything unpleasant is appropriately blah, blah being one of those senseless words that expresses an idea clearly by sound. A well-established substitute for yes is, I hope to tell you. These tags are amusing for only a short time. They are soon stale and must be replaced. How a phrase has a meteoric career and sputters out is seen by recalling the same type of slang expression, such as the now historic I should worry and I'll tell the world. Occasionally, one of these shelved sayings stages a comeback. We noted in the latest flapper vocabulary printed in the Flapper magazine the ancient word wangdoodle. Our grandmothers used this word humorously to describe mournful, whining music or a ranting speaker. Modern youth has adopted the term and made it a synonym for a jazz band. It is rare, however, that the slang of a generation ago can be dusted off and applied to current topics. Generally, there is nothing more conspicuously lifeless than a defunct slang phrase. Flapper Dames and Flapper Roosters by Freeman Tilden. The Ladies' Home Journal, May 1923. We have been making believe for a long time that the flapper is necessarily a very young person, and that flapperism is a new disease which has attacked only that part of our population which has just about reached the age when human beings first consent to have their faces washed without making a loud outcry. Allowing for overlapping on both sides, you might say the years of late adolescence and early adultness. The fact is that flapperism is confined to no particular age, and that the reason it looks to be typically an affection of the young folks is simply because, being freer and better mixers, they pass it on to each other more readily, like the measles. But flapperism did not originate spontaneously among the younger set. They took to it with all the eagerness with which youth embraces a risky innovation. They made it go. They endowed it with all the pleasanter features which it ever possessed. If you look back beyond the present period and low estate of flapperism, you will recall that the thing was at first made rather likable, because then there was a spirit of adventure and grace about it. But the point is, it was handed to them by their elders. This assertion is, as they say in geometry, to be demonstrated. Perhaps it would be well to consider what flapperism is. It may be the result of an evil germ working on innocent tissue, but I don't think so. It looks to me more like what that old lady who used to be called the grandmother of the Russian Revolution said about Bolshevism. Bolshevism, she declared, is not a theory or system of government. It is just a form of behavior. When you come to think of it, that is a rather neat summing up. By the same token, flapperism looks like a form of behavior, the result of an attitude toward life. And as the younger people of the world don't have any attitude toward life, and it is lucky for them that they don't, this attitude, originated by their elders and so-called betters, was formulated for them and handed down to them. They grasped it eagerly, made it their own, and, with the fine abandon of the scanty-yeared, proceeded to run it wildly into the ground. The world had been leading up to this form of behavior on the part of adults for a long time. Paintings were not any good unless you did not know what they were about. Poetry was not poetry if it had rhyme and meter and lyric loveliness. Government was not any good unless it was in the hands of those who had never had the wit and will to govern themselves. Mothers were outdated and lacked chic. Fidelity and chastity were the badge of the backwoods citizenry. I am putting this bluntly, possibly even a little excessively. But that is just what the insurgent attitude amounted to in the end, and just how, as I see it, the younger folks got insurged into bobbed hair, knee skirts, and a dozen other outbursts of flapperism, including a general demeanor which can best be summed up as extremely bad manners. Not understand that there was anything necessarily evil about many aspects of flapperism on the part of the juveniles. I mean only that this was part of the general attitude that everything must be done in defiance of former style, manners, and taste. I hope it is not irrelevant to say just a word here about insurgents, because if you agree with me that this attitude on the part of the elders was the precursor of what has been called flapperism on the part of the youngsters, it seems worthwhile to observe things at the source. 9 out of 10 insurgents are people who, having failed to achieve anything under the rules of the game because of their laziness, incompetence, or crankiness, are willing to cheat to win. That part of New York City which is known as Greenwich Village is, with certain honorable exceptions, made up of people who, failing to victimize the world into believing that they have anything valid to say with pen or brush or burin or mallet, go shrieking around the 5 boroughs trying to get the rules changed so that they can hold the 5th ace up their sleeves. The worst flappers the world has ever seen are those who are of the age of 40 or over. The old flapper. You know her. You know him. Every thé dansant, every dinner dance, every ocean steamship, every summer and winter resort has a goodly sprinkling of them. Talk about Gertie's bobbed hair and knickers. Why, the most advanced and bumptious juvenile flappers ever seen are cambric tea compared with the older variety. When I was last in New York City, I went to the Sardanapalus Hotel to see the original Flapper Dame. You understand, of course, what a Flapper Dame is. A Flapper Dame is an adult female person who is to the youthful flapper what the regular measles is to the light German form, only more so. A Flapper Dame is a person who has reached the age of discretion and sobriety without having achieved either the one or the other. A Flapper Dame has nothing on her mind but her coiffure, and often very little of the genuine about that. She is the mother, or the grandmother, or the stepmother of the flappers. She is the whyness and witchness of flapperism, unless I am mistaken. So I went to the Sardanapalus Hotel. You know, when the Greek writers of comedy wished to indicate a person or place proverbial for pomp and luxury, they called it a Sardanapalus. And this name will serve perhaps better than any other, for this hotel happens to be the last word in exclusiveness and expensiveness. There is a grand dazzle and a flaunting of dollar signs about it. A wise friend of mine tells me that if you scrape the surface, you find a lot of base metal underneath. He says that a good deal of the silverware is like the loving cups which the former Kaiser, William Hohenzollern, used to give his friends, pewter under a thin plate. I don't know about that. What I do know is that the thé dansant and the dinner dances and the Babylon Room and the billionaire grills of the Sardanapalus are world famous among those who desire the least possible value for their money. I wanted to see this phenomenon, the Dowager Empress of the flapper world. I suppose she is the original Flapper Dame on this side of the ocean. She is, to most of the other Flapper Dames of the country, a sort of folio first edition. This Flapper Dame of the Sardanapalus has been dancing since 1914. Oh, naturally she doesn't dance 24 hours a day, but it is notorious among those who visit the Sardanapalus either regularly or occasionally that with a few unimportant exceptions, she has been dancing at every afternoon tea since the year the World War began. I saw the object of my pilgrimage. I wished afterward that I had gone to see the polar bears in Central Park instead. It would have been more apheartening. This Flapper Dame seemed, at the age of 60-odd, to have incorporated into herself all the flapper qualities of face, figure, dress, and manner which have been denounced as the scourge of modern youth. I had seen thousands of Flapper Dames in the hotels and on the steamships, but I had never seen one before that told the whole story at a glance. They told me a good deal about this particular Flapper Dame of the Sardanapalus. She has scads of money, of course. She has so many gowns, each one shorter than the other, that she can hardly repeat on any of them. She practically supports a whole crew of lounge lizards, whom she pays for dancing with her. This hotel happens to be a favorite roost for young men who make their living by being dance partners for Flapper Dames. These young men, who possess everything except brains, are living exponents of the sagacity of Dr. Malthus. Dr. Malthus, you will remember, was the gentleman who maintained that the world had too many people in it. The disheartening thing about the Sardanapalus was not the presence of this Dowager Flapper Dame, however. So far as she was concerned, with her cosmetic makeup and elephantine kittenishness, you could put it down to an individual case of senility. But on this particular afternoon, the place seemed to swarm with grandmother flappers of about the same general persuasion. Unless they were dancing with their grandsons, they must have been indulging in paid dancing partners, the aforesaid lounge lizards. And you couldn't help having an uneasy reflection that there are altogether too many Flapper Dames flapping their inane way amongst us. You couldn't help remembering that it was the same on the steamship on which you crossed to Europe, and in the European capitals, and in Florida at the resort places, and in the White Mountains. I have been wondering just what is the keynote of the grandmother flapper's inspiration. I hazard a guess that it is ignorant cynicism at bottom. What makes me think that it is hopeless cynicism is the conversation that we hear from flapper dames whenever they do congregate. You can sit among them for a whole evening and hear nothing except the latest exploits of some bootlegger who has ferried another 1,000 bottles of moonshine into the neighborhood, the latest recipes for manufacturing homemade fire water, babbling laments about the impending drought, and the rehearsal of some recently published book of ill-smelling realism which nobody would have ever heard of if some indiscreet, self-appointed censor hadn't tried to have it suppressed. It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder, among other things, what we have a right to expect from the young persons who come in contact with these elderly flappers, and what their imitative version of flapperism is going to be. At least it explains that apparent cynicism on the part of the young girls commonly called flappers. I say apparent cynicism, for it is really only on the surface. Youth can't be cynical, even if it tries. The great difference between the antique flapper dame and the young flapper is that the young flapper is really interested in the world, is really spontaneously eager, ready to try anything because it appears to be the way to find out life. But for drab, sodden, dispirited gaiety, and hard, sour, and acrid joy, you have to go to the grandmother of the flapper, who seems to have only one possible pleasure after cutting adrift from a normal existence, which is the chance of shocking somebody. The desire to achieve a little distinction by doing or looking or saying something shocking is the resort of people who lack any genuine merit. An Englishwoman, sometimes referred to as one of the flapper grandmothers, wrote a book a few years ago which had for its chief attraction the fact that it told all those things about herself which are ordinarily not considered good taste or good manners to reveal. What this woman tried to do in literary form, the flapper dame of one sort or another also tries to put over. It has become so common that it is no longer shocking. Still, as unlovely and meaningless as the grandmother flapper is, it is fair to say that she is not quite so depressing as the elderly flapper of the other sex. Male flappers? Oh yes, indeed. They have the same habitat and the same general characteristics as the old flappers of the once called weaker sex, and they are the deadliest of all. When a woman flaps, she flaps, but when a man flaps, he flops. In dealing with the mature male flapper, or flapper rooster, I will present 3 types which are pretty familiar to everybody. The youngest of the mature male flappers, or flapper roosters, is probably mature only up as far as his neck. The top of him is a case of retarded development. In this class come the lounge lizard, the sofa sloth, and the couch chameleon. Natural history specimens which toil not, neither spin nor lift a productive finger in the workday world. In a good many cases, you can probably look to a fond papa and an idolizing mama as being responsible for this bit of human dereliction. The chances are that papa wanted Freddie to be a gentleman instead of an uncouth toiler in the marts of commerce, and mama considered Freddie an artistic temperament who would have to be handled very carefully or he might collapse. Freddie is the result of this forethought on the part of his parents. You find him at the age of 30 or more swarming with the rest of the drone world at dances, dinner parties, meetings of the glass-eyed intelligentsia, parlor socialist conventions which begin with a foxtrot, end with a hug whirl, and have petting moments in the middle. And he is the white-haired Freddie when it comes to procuring the necessary alcoholic stimulant for a select party of methyl suicides. You don't know whether to laugh or cry when you see this type of flapper rooster. At all events, what you know for certain is that it isn't going to be any use trying to uplift the Freddies of the flapper world. They are going to be just like that until they die. Nothing can be done for them. Neither medical science, nor psychoanalysis, nor brain surgery is going to avail. All that you can reasonably hope for is that an overdose of their favorite sedative will do the trick someday. The next type of flapper rooster is a more important and interesting exhibit. It is the middle-aged male flapper, who has done some work and even shown some merit in his life, but who has gone in for the jazz thing and let it grow on him. I heard a case in point dealing with these flappers the other day. It seems that there was a convention of businessmen called to discuss a pretty important matter pertaining to this particular business. The delegates came to New York from all over the country, and a serious program of conferences and speeches was planned, at which, to get the best out of it, every delegate would have to apply his mind and his time with thoroughness. It was not to be expected, of course, that there would not be moments of relaxation. There would be theater parties, and there would be lighter moments after dinner, but all in all, it was a serious matter. One of the men who had charge of the program for this convention told me that while most of the delegates came to New York City with an earnest purpose, there was an alarming number of men who could never be found when wanted, except in some place of jazzy joy. They were long on the thé dansant. They did not begrudge a few hours spent with illicit booze in flapper company. But if anything sober and considered was wanted of them, they were too tired. The proportion of these flapper roosters to the whole body was not large, but it was large enough to bespeak the attention of their fellows and make them wonder. These men may not flap very furiously in the smaller cities and towns whence they came, but they are distinctly the flapper type when they get a chance. And the important thing about it is that most of them don't realize what has happened to them. The thing has just oozed into their systems in a subtle way. Anyone who does business in a big city like New York knows the type of middle-aged businessman who has become a flapper of the worst kind. I don't mean the frequenter of what is called the underworld as such, nor the rounders and achronicles, rising at sunset and retiring at sunrise, who have no apparent purpose in life except to go from one all-night restaurant to another and show no visible means of support or exertion. I mean a rather new type of businessman, who, instead of hustling to get his work done and going out to the golf links, or playing tennis, or doing a long spin over the roads in his motor car, now vanishes from the office to some roof garden, where there is an orchestra playing upon instruments that make a peculiar and deranging noise, and can be found flapper roosting with such members of the younger generation as are out of parental control. Looking into one of these jazz palaces the other day, I couldn't help noticing that practically all the flapper roosters present were middle-aged or old men. Their dance partners were a good deal younger than themselves, and evidently not of the most innocent variety, although you could not exactly place them in any definite category. The sight of these flapper roosters, who were mostly pathetically awkward and unbeautiful in their efforts to be joyous, gave me a lot to think of. In the first place, they were well dressed. If it gives us any pleasure to know it, there's no doubt that the American men are the best dressed men in the world, judging from any Occidental standard you choose. There was a corporeally clean look about them too. But their faces, as they danced, showed hardly a sign of whatever pleasure they were feeling. It was almost as though they had been sent out to do this stunt as part of a day's work. The physical contact which is inherent to the modern dance seems to have the effect of making the face of the dancer look extremely bored and miserable. When I say that, I am speaking of these middle-aged specimens. It is quite different with a crowd of the young folks we have been hurling the epithet flapper at. they do get something akin to real joy out of it. It all looked as though these flapper roosters were trying to flee from something. From what? That's the question. What are flappers of this sort trying to get away from? Perhaps from themselves. Perhaps they think that this is the shortcut to that real happiness in life which the old fogies used to think could be gained only by the development of character. Anyway, the middle-aged flapper doesn't seem to get any fun out of it. I asked a man who knows a good deal about these things to explain to me the phenomenon of the flapper rooster, or the middle-aged flapper businessman, the other day. Well, what can you expect in a business age when men have to move so fast, was his reply. The old diversions don't satisfy a nervous system which has been stimulated beyond normal. Such men work at too hot a pace, and this rushing into jazz excesses is the result. That sounds well, but I don't think I subscribe to it. In the first place, the fact that so many men in the business world are doing hard and useful work and do not resort to flapper activities gives the lie to it right away. You hear a good deal about the men who commit excesses, but you naturally don't hear anything about the vast majority of middle-aged men who do their day's work, play a little healthful play, and spend some part of each day in developing their minds and their characters by good reading, good conversation, and the quiet stimulation of learning to know their wives and children better. Besides, any great executive will tell you that the men in his organization who get the most work done, of the most exacting kind, are not the men who have to rush into flapper activities at all. Their diversions are wholesome, well-proportioned, and without being too profound or pedantic about it, are in the best sense self-cultural. I am afraid that this talk about the fast pace at which American people go is too often used as the prop to bolster up a lot of poor work and poor living on the part of the people who don't like to play the game according to the rules. As an excuse for the middle-aged male flapper, I can't see it at all. If the flapper rooster can be reached at all and made to see himself as he is, perhaps it might be by way of appealing to his pride. On that ground, I ask him to have a look at himself. I don't ask any man to retire into the sere and yellow before his time. On the contrary, what we are likely to forget is to wring the utmost of true enjoyment out of life. But I still ask the flapper rooster to go into his closet and take a peep at himself in the mirror, and remember that he is no longer physically or spiritually one of Mr. Booth Tarkington's young 17s. To do this may give him a shock, but it will in the end be a wholesome concussion. When a middle-aged person tries to do those things which were meant for the sole possession of youth, he ought to recall that he is carrying too much weight. He is loaded below his plimsoll mark, and he isn't going to make the speed. He may think that his feet are the feet of Adonis, but balance himself ever so dizzily on his toes as he may, he can't conceal that slight stiffness which the passing years have given him. I don't want to hurt his feelings, but so it was meant to be. The jazz dances and the jazz atmosphere which the flapper rooster cultivates have the net effect of making his lack of suppleness a little more apparent. If he wants to forget that the years are passing, let him consider that this is not the way. I can't advise as to just what is the way, but I know this is not. He doesn't thrill us at all. He makes us laugh sardonically. It isn't only as to dancing. It runs through all those flapper roosters' excesses which are an infringement on the copyright of youth. The gay parties I have attended in the company of these folks are principally remarkable for not being gay at all. They are almost mortuary. But what they do is to set the fool pace for the youngest generation and divert it from its natural course, where it could have some real pleasure. If you want to see the reason for the existence of the flapper as we have been using the word, look at the flapper's elder brother, or even at the flapper's grandfather. Speaking of the flapper's grandfather brings us to the third and last type, the type of elderly flapper rooster who makes you feel something unsweetly akin to pain. I was talking with a professional chaperone at a tremendously big popular dance hall the other day. This was a mighty interesting place, so big that you couldn't hear a voice across it, with perfect floors, 2 brass bands, one of which started the moment the other ceased, and a low price of admission which filled it every night. It was a modern institution indeed. There were several highly skilled chaperones, women with eagle eyes and lightning perceptions who kept things as straight as possible. And as it was a sort of big neighborhood affair, it was certainly not an evil place. But here is what she said. Most of the young men who come in here without partners are a pretty decent sort. I give them an introduction to some nice girls. I can spot the bad ones at once. We just freeze them away. We have a way of making it impossible for them to get any introduction or to introduce themselves to any of the young women. The hardest people we have to deal with are the old flappers. That was just the way she put it, the old flappers. I asked her to explain. Well, I mean these old duffers who have gone dumbbell about dancing and spend all their time trying to get young women to dance with them. Some of them are really dangerous, but a good many are just old fools and pests. Before I came here, I used to be a chaperone in a New Hampshire summer hotel in the hot months and down south in winter for the same proprietors. The old flappers were the bane of my life in both places. I wonder how they get that way. There's one over there. That's the kind I mean. That particular old duffer isn't so bad. He lives just around the corner and comes in every night with his daughter, who is about 50, I think. But so far as looks go, that's the kind. I looked this particular old duffer over, and sure enough, he looked like 100 others you might see in places ranging from a nickel a dance place to the most exclusive hotel tea dance. The mark of the flapper was upon him. He wasn't like Grampy Brown, who just liked to join in the quadrille in the old square dance days for the fun of the thing, until his rheumatiz forced him to quit. This particular old duffer had made the dizzy life his chief regard, so far as you could judge. To do him justice, he cut a better figure than some of the middle-aged fat flapper roosters that you notice perspiring dreadfully and making a sad attempt to gamble. But the atrophied glare of the flapper habitué was in his eyes, and he showed that rather silly face of the person who devotes himself exclusively to sensuous proceedings. Another good place to study flapper dames and flapper roosters is on board one of the great ocean steamships, the kind where you take an elevator to go from deck to deck, and where you are just beginning to get acquainted with a small corner of your own deck when the steward raps on the door and says, "Are you all packed up? We reach Southampton in the morning." If there is a gay party on board, study the ages of the gay ones. If there is a jazz festival, observe the fact that there is a showing of white hair on the heads of the star performers. If there is some gossip flying around, take a memorandum of the age of one of the flappers concerned. See if he doesn't run up beyond what we have called the age of judicial temperament. At the same time, keep a sharp eye on the younger folks, the so-called flappers on board. If you happen to be on a ship where their demeanor is not in general more serious, their fun less hectic, and their manners not better than a large percentage of the older flappers, then indeed you have picked a most remarkable craft to get you across the ocean. And it isn't only the big ships either. I crossed the Atlantic last year on the maiden voyage of what is called a second-class boat, although some of these new second-classers make the old type of luxury ships seem like Cardiff colliers by comparison. This was a Canadian run, and the immigration laws of Canada have become very strict. So the result was that the people in the cabin were of the kind commonly called the best. The poorest, who traveled second class, were mostly the sons and daughters of refined British families whose fortunes had been dented by the war, and were going to Canada to make their way. There were also people of evident wealth, some of social pretensions, and one or two who had a sir or lady as a handle. I have a keen recollection that on this ship, it was not the younger people who splashed the vermilion spots of flapperism, who held the special dinner parties, who gave the orchestra leader a glass arm and a fatigued step with their constant demands for more syncopated music. It wasn't the pretty young girls who got themselves talked about. It certainly wasn't the younger men who wanted the clock stopped so that the frivels could go on indefinitely. And I do recall that one young person had a good deal of a horrid time looking after father. It set me thinking. I'm not here to tell the world that something is the matter with it, or that we are all going to the bow-wows. I am not a gloom blower. But I could not help thinking then, and now, that the vicious assaults on flappers and flapperism, meaning the younger set who have been hailed before justice as defying the conventions and wrecking the national life, have been pointed a little bit out of the direction where the truth lies. As for the elderly flapper, I don't know what is going to be done about him, or her. I am not proposing a league for the protection of our elders from themselves, or a society for the rescue of wayward parents. Very likely, the younger generation will take their elders in hand gently but firmly at some not very distant date. A Daughter of the World War by Mina Van Winkle. The New Britain Herald, November 4th, 1927. Give the flapper a chance. Don't treat her as a joke, and don't go to the other extreme and wag your head sadly over her every action. Get down to fundamentals with her. Realize that she is, at bottom, a healthy, fine-souled American girl, and you will presently discover that instead of being a national problem, she is one of the nation's greatest assets. This is the advice of Lieutenant Mina Van Winkle, Chief Policewoman of the National Capital and President of the Policewomen's National Association. She speaks from a background of wide experience and first-hand knowledge. She has studied the flapper in every big American city. She has made this study a hobby, traveling from coast to coast to learn all she could. And, making this study, she has reached a number of interesting conclusions. First of all, Lieutenant Van Winkle declares, the flapper is an inevitable product of the World War. She is, as Lieutenant Van Winkle sees it, the child of circumstances. She is a symbol of her times, an outgrowth of the clash of mighty forces in the American social world. Most of all, she has a heritage of French influences. She doesn't realize this in the least, but it is true nevertheless. The flapper is a saucy, fun-loving, cigarette-puffing, joy-riding young scamp? Possibly. But it was inevitable. And furthermore, it is too late to change it. The thing to do now is to understand her and help her instead of scolding and repressing her. That is the way Mrs. Van Winkle understands the situation. It is 10 years now since the United States entered the World War, and the day that war was declared was the day the flapper was born. So Mrs. Van Winkle puts it. She explains it thus. The American girl took the hazard of war just as much as did the American boy, and she is still taking it. We hear little now of our war girls. God knows the American boy made the supreme sacrifice of manhood, but so did the American girl make sacrifices. We took thousands upon thousands of American girls from the shelter of their homes, city girls and country girls, from the protection of their mother's apron strings, and we turned them loose into the whirlpool of war. I was in Florida recently. At Jacksonville and St. Augustine, there were still displayed time-stained old posters of the war period, urging our girls to go to Washington and do their bit for Uncle Sam. Oh, the cruelty, injustice, short-sightedness of the doubtless well-intentioned policy of hurling thousands upon thousands of girls upon the capital of the nation, and not satisfied with sacrificing them in overcrowded office buildings and rooming houses, pitching thousands of other girls overseas to face, and in many instances to succumb to, perils for which shell fire might mercifully have been substituted. It was France, in my judgment, and not Washington, that really provided the influence that we saw creeping among our girls as we settled down to the winning of the war, the influence that we still see upon them. The thousands of girls that we flung overseas came home eventually, or rather, most of them did. Many of these girls found their way back to Washington. Too many of them remained in Washington. Peace forgot them. They had had a great adventure, and they craved more excitement. They mingled with the girls that had been left behind at Washington. Our girls were changing, had changed. From Paris to Washington, and then through the 48 states, the influence of certain French manners and customs spread. Many did not recognize the Parisian influence. Many do not recognize it now. Some are still blind to its serious aspects. The comic supplement treats the flapper as though her problem, which at bottom is our problem, were simply a joke, but it isn't. It was this craving for adventure, for excitement, which caused most of the trouble, as Mrs. Van Winkle sees it. The flapper, the girl who came back from war work and her younger sister who didn't go, found the element of adventure surging strongly within her. The theater and the movie failed to satisfy. The old forms of recreation seemed flat. The old prohibitions and rules seemed tame. And so, the flapper grew into a defier of convention. She rolled her stockings, puffed cigarettes, took a drink occasionally, dispensed with as much clothing as she possibly could, took to rouge and powder, dabbled in petting parties and joy rides, developed a fondness for late dances. She discovered that taking a chance was adventure, so she proceeded to take chances with gay abandon. She is still doing it. True enough, but what's the answer? Mrs. Van Winkle is not discouraged. Far from it. She is supremely hopeful. Here is why she is hopeful. The flapper at heart is clean. What she needs is guidance, not censure. It is too late to get her back over the line she crossed during and after the war, but she'll make out all right if she isn't pulled down. First and foremost, thinks Mrs. Van Winkle, provide the flapper with a substitute for her everlasting dance parties. And, adds this cultured matron, there is no substitute as good as athletics. Encourage girls to play baseball, to swim, to box, to row, to ride, to engage in all of the sports that formerly were considered exclusively masculine diversions. The number of healthy, athletic girls is increasing rapidly, but not rapidly enough. A great nationwide athletic movement should be launched that would reach all girls. Once permit the American girl to become the athletic girl in the same broad sense that the American boy has developed into the athletic boy, and the flapper will vanish. That is Mrs. Van Winkle's idea.
Then there is the petting party. Mrs. Van Winkle approves of it no more than do the harassed mothers of the land who are wondering how to stop it, and she has a ready answer for this problem too. Create good community centers where girls may mingle with boys to their heart's content. Don't compel girls and boys to steal away into dark corners, into curtained automobiles to spoon. Remember, spooning can be a healthy symptom of love. Simply encourage the right kind of spooning and provide the right kind of place for it. There is a marked difference between petting and spooning, and if there is a normal outlet for spooning, petting will sink to a minimum. And one thing more, adds Mrs. Van Winkle. Don't let the spooning stage last too long. Marry the flapper early. Arrange your economic conditions, if need be, to ensure her sheik the same opportunity to marry young that his father had. Offer him every chance to earn a living wage, enough to support a wife and the children that should come. These, then, are the highlights in Mrs. Van Winkle's plan for dealing with the flapper. Her police experience compels her to supplement them with this. Keep the streets safe for girls. Look up the record of auto drivers. Drive the auto masher from the street. He is one of the greatest menaces to girlhood that America has. And above all, says Mrs. Van Winkle, use education instead of prohibition. It works better. If you have to educate yourself before you can educate your daughter, do it by all means. Don't try to hedge her in with "thou shalt not" signs. Be patient and understanding instead. It will pay. The flapper at bottom is a fine girl. All she needs is a square deal, a little kindly, understanding advice and friendship. Given those, and she will disarm her bitterest critics. So says Mina Van Winkle. Slam books anger flappers, may break up their clan. The Washington Herald, March 28, 1922. Thumbs down for district flappers. They are becoming extinct by their own hand. Ever hear of a slam book? Well, this is the latest and most deadly of flapper idiosyncrasies. It is by this book that all flappers will soon become angry at one another, quit the clan, and trot back to girlish normalcy. Each flapper in the city owns a slam book, which contains a roster of the entire flapper personnel in the city. In these books are written the most insidious of slams about the flappers. And the peculiar thing about it all is that the flappers slam the flappers, with the result that the flapper friendship throughout the city is fastly crumbling. Suppose you were a flapper with the pretty name of Mary Jones, and you went calling on some of your friends. The first thing you would see at your friends' homes would be a slam book. Of course, you would be interested in what your friends think about you. Well, you quickly turn in your name. This is what you would see. Mary Jones. Nice girl, but no brains. Thinks she can dance. Poor fish. Loves 'em all, but is so silly she can't hold 'em long. Right pretty, but she makes up too much. That red hat she wears is a sight, and those worn sport shoes, but why say more? After reading these nice things about yourself, you would naturally want to get even, so you wet your pencil and start slamming your friends. Of course you are pretty angry, but you try to think of the meanest things possible to write, and you do. Flappers all over the city read one another's slam books. And angry? Well, it is believed that this will be the cause of a flapper war, or the utter self-annihilation of flapperism. 2 flappers attended the automobile show last night at Convention Hall, with the hope of buying an automobile which has 2 side pockets in the front seat. After inspecting one automobile, one of the girls turned to her friend and said, "I think this one will be all right, Helen. The pocket is just right to carry a slam book around in." Rudolph Jose, one of the officials of the show, asked one of the young ladies what she meant by a slam book. "A slam book is just what it means. It slams," answered the young flapper. And so the flappers bought the car. It is well to note that the automobile show, with its novel display of snappy cars, large side pockets included, may expedite the pending flapper war. Fast cars to carry slam books to your friends. Why not? The books will soon be full, providing all flappers buy cars.
Older Japanese alarmed by advent of flapperism. Petting cleanup begun. The Alaska Daily Empire, August 6, 1924. Tokyo, August 6th. Parking, petting, and the rouge pots of the West are among the first American institutions which will be banned by Japan if the desires of an increasing number of Japanese are taken into consideration. The advent of the Japanese flapper is the cause for alarm among many of the older Japanese. The introduction at certain dancing halls in Tokyo of flapper dances, flapper clothes, and even Western flapper talk has tended to increase the alarm among the older Japanese. And now the police of Tokyo, Kobe, Osaka, and Kyoto, strengthened by the Taikosha, an unusual group of Japanese who announced their intention of preserving ancient Japanese customs, have made the matter of a flapper cleanup a part of the official summer work of the official regulators of the law. Many contend that immigration exclusion and a consequent awakening of nationalistic consciousness was the cause for the crusade against flapperism in Tokyo and the other leading Japanese cities of Japan. Others will tell you that the Washington Conference was at the back of it all. Others will argue quite forcefully that the nearness of Russia and the free Russian institutions are responsible for it. Fact or fancy, all of these arguments have tended to increase the numbers of those belonging to the Taikosha and kindred patriotic Japanese societies, all bent on correcting alleged delinquencies of Japanese youth. It has been a matter of record in police circles for many years that the youth of the country was becoming more and more free, and more was Japanese youth believed to be drifting away from old Japanese ideals of civilization. Education, the cramming of much knowledge into a race which has been less than 100 years in communication with the outside world, strong elements of repression which have and are still being brought to bear against the struggles of freedom, all these are said to have played a part in increasing young Japan's fight for freedom, if not radicalism. The nearness of Soviet Russia, with a very evident interest throughout Japanese schools for Russian literature, the increasing number of American and European tourists who come to Japan, both of these have aided the restless Japanese young people to wish for more of the West. And while some have learned the West well, others have yielded to their hysterical desire for all that the West has to offer, and by learning too fast, have given their fellow countrymen a chance to call Japanese youth radical. At any rate, the police of 4 cities have announced their intention of censoring Western dancing as it has been given at public dances by Japanese. The Imperial Hotel, Tokyo, for several years the gathering place of one of the most cosmopolitan crowds in the Far East, a place where Japanese, Chinese, American, Englishmen, Frenchmen have mingled on the dance floor, has been forced to exclude the Japanese young people who have sought to attend the Imperial's dances. The management, it is believed, has been opposed to such steps, but frequently repeated requests by the Taikosha have made such a ban necessary. Pretty flapper ghost harasses a family man. The New York Herald, April 6, 1922. Millerton, New York, April 5th. There is a lot of talk going on here about the flapper ghost, which for some time now has been visiting the home of Theron Snyder at night and peering into a second-story window. Mr. Snyder professes only a nodding acquaintance with the ghost, but says that so far as he has been able to see it through the glass, it has bobbed hair and is addicted to the use of eyebrow pencils and lipsticks. Also, it is pretty. Mr. Snyder is middle-aged, the father of a family, and an employee of the Central New England Railroad. He takes no stock in ghosts and has no time for them. Neither does he take stock in or have time for flappers in the flesh. But the fact remains that almost every night there is a tapping, as of someone gently rapping on the glass of a second-story window, and then through the glass can be dimly seen the head of a flapper, flapping about without much very visible means of support as are shown by the flapper in real life. Every effort has been made to solve the mystery, but to no avail. It has been suggested that perhaps Mary Ellen has come down from Antigonish on a visit, but there are no signs of human footprints on the ground under the window, and nothing to indicate that the flapper climbed up a ladder and peeked into Mr. Snyder's window. Investigations are being made by all the amateur ghost hunters of this vicinity, and it is these investigations that are causing the talk. Some of these investigators are very young men, and they seem to be trying to steal Mr. Snyder's ghost rather than solve the mystery. Two of them are known to have placed a box of bonbons on their windowsills at night, and lingered hopefully within their rooms, dressed in their Sunday suits, but to no avail. A third put a small bottle of gin on the windowsill, but even this did not attract the flapper ghost, which remains true to the household of Mr. Snyder. Several members of the Snyder family have seen the face with its pert bobbed hair peeking in at the window. They have tried to catch it, but have failed. They have not, however, accepted the offer of certain of the young amateur investigators, who volunteered to catch the flapper ghost or die in the attempt. The ghost, so far, has done nothing to the members of the Snyder family but look at them. Village upset by strange find in house of the flapper ghost. The New York Herald, May 4th, 1922. Poughkeepsie, May 3rd. Discovery of a suit of underwear bearing stains that appear to be blood spots, a pair of stockings, part of a shoe, and a wreath of flowers from a girl's hat with a quantity of ashes beneath the floor of the ghost house at Millerton has given a sinister aspect to a strange case. The discovery was made when the family of Theron Snyder, who has occupied the house for some time, decided to move because of the disturbances made by the flapper ghost. This ghost was described as a young girl with bobbed hair, who had been seen peering in second-story windows at the Snyder home. Mr. Snyder said the bobbed-hair girl ghost did not attempt to harm them in any way, but that he and his family were annoyed by the mysterious happening, and it was getting on their nerves, and so he packed up to move. While packing up, he found a place where the carpet had been taken up from the floor, and boards lifted and then replaced. The sawed portion of the floor was again removed, and beneath it were found the stained garments belonging to a girl of about 14 years of age. With them was found the ash-like substance, and this has been turned over to Dr. Howard P. Carpenter of the Hudson River State Hospital for investigation. Edward K. Haas, Assistant District Attorney, also has started an investigation. Mother not to blame for flappers flapping. The New York Evening World, February 3rd, 1922. For one brief moment, it seemed as if the flapper solution were settled once and for all. The flapper flaps because her mother flaps. No less a person than Representative Alice Robertson of Oklahoma, the only woman in Congress, has just come forth with this statement. "You can blame the flapper's mother every time," said Miss Robertson. "As the mothers flap, so flap the youngsters. Mother sets the pace and her daughter follows. While mother is flapping around at an afternoon tea or at a reception or bridge game, daughter goes out flapping in an auto. It's only natural. Let the mothers stay at home, then they would find that their daughters would come flapping home, flap into an apron, and spend their out-of-school hours in a thoroughly wholesome way. But you can't expect a young girl to stay home and knit when her mother is out playing cards or flapping around." Let us repeat. For one brief moment, it all seemed clear. Perfectly so. With this idea fixed in our head, and our teeth gritted against the flapperish mother who has brought such comment upon her little innocent daughter's head, we trotted up to see Professor Herman Horn of New York University. Professor Horn panned the flapper pretty well the other day in an address to graduates of Washington Irving High School. He said, "A flapper is a person who prefers ignorance to the truth. A flapper has a conscience which does not bother her. Therefore, we thought we would find out how clever Professor Horn was at panning the flapper mother. But here is where we met our Waterloo. Here is where Representative Alice Robertson's flapper mother solutions fell through. I do not agree with Miss Robertson at all," declared Professor Horn. "I know too many mothers of flappers. While flappers flap, mothers mourn. But mothers, yes, mothers of 50 and grandmothers of 70, flap around in low-cut blouses, skirts to their knees, and smoke cigarettes." We persisted, still trying to defend the flapper. Professor Horn raised his eyebrows as he said, "A few, perhaps, in New York City. But what of the mothers in the suburbs? Of the mothers all around us in New Jersey, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and on the outskirts of all this city, and in the heart of it too? No, I have met too many mothers of flappers to say that the mother leads in the flapping. Let me repeat. While flappers flap, mothers mourn. The flapper is a sophisticated youngster who could tell her mother lots of things, but usually doesn't. Mothers have changed but little with the changing times. Flappers have outchanged the changing times. A mother is usually willing to listen. The flapper knows it already. Mothers like to help their daughters catch their bows. The flapper catches hers all by herself. Mothers still believe in some form of oversight of adolescent girls, but flappers chaperone themselves. The American mother still rejects the intimacies of Lady Nicotine, whom the flapper makes her patron saint. Mothers much prefer their daughters should not know some of the seamy side of life, while flappers turn the garment of life inside out. After this outburst of philosophy, we were convinced that the flapper is quite original in her own artistic, flapping way. After all, she is a problem, and we must still keep on criticizing her. But she makes delicious copy and splendid models for magazine covers. The flapper movement is worldwide, continued Professor Horn. In the New Germany, it is known as the youth movement. All over the world, youth has declared war on the old customs and the old schools, but mothers are still conservative. Mothers still take slight comfort in the thought, when flappers marry and become mothers, they will cease to flap. But there is the disquieting thought that to the all-knowing flapper marriage does not mean motherhood. You are hitting the flapper pretty hard, we remarked.
I am defending the flapper's mother, replied Professor Horn. You see, I know them both well, the flappers and the mothers. The modern mother is ready to play the game of girlish pranks and catching a husband, but not to the flapping limit. American flapper most important person here. Aged 17, she acts 30. By May Christie. The New York Evening World, November 29th, 1922. The most important person in America today is the flapper, announced a really clever woman friend of mine who, having had 3 husbands of her own, ought to know a thing or two about mere man and what attracts him. The flapper, I repeated, harking back in my mind to 6 young things of sweet 16 or thereabouts, genus American, on the boat coming over from England to New York, who, blandly oblivious to all male creatures, formed a little manless Eden of their own, and seemed utterly contented with each other's sole society. They were very young, these girls, and yet curiously grown up in their manners, as compared with English flapperdom of the same age. Girls of 16 are still schoolroom misses in the old country, and not allowed to forget it for a moment either. But just allow the little English miss to escape from her chaperone or governess and put her on an Atlantic liner, home of ephemeral but thrilling while they last affairs, and yes, I will admit it, you would find her flirting with the best of them and taking to it as a duckling to the water. So the flapper is the most important person in America, is she? I rather wonderingly remarked. It isn't so in England any longer. She was at the top of the wave during the war, but now the flapper craze has departed with bobbed hair and the short skirt. They're out of date, all 3. And it's the better balanced, sympathetic, quieter, less expensive, and less demanding young woman who is having her day in England. In America, said my friend, the flapper didn't become the rage until she gained sophistication. The war brought that. The men used to like the older girl or woman because she'd garnered knowledge, poise, and a certain measure of experience that made her interesting. These far outweighed the fascination of the flapper's youth. But now? In addition to her youth, the flapper has acquired sophistication, has she? I suggested, rather astonished, being British. And the result's a knockout, as it were? Decidedly. Let's go down to the lobby of this hotel, and you can see for yourself. So down we went to the lounge of the hotel where I am staying, seated ourselves upon a sofa, and proceeded to observe. Along came a slim and very fashionably attired young person, complete with pert little hat cocked over the right eye, cleverly done complexion, undulating walk, and all the wiles of the eternal Eve. But not a flapper, whispered I. She must be 25 or 6. She's 17. Now watch. The man appeared. Keen, clever-looking, not very young, but obviously entranced by her. They sat down near us. We heard them talk. And really, I'll say this for her, she talked like 30, a rather blasé, world-weary, but distinctly clever 30, who was oh so well accustomed to adoring swains and luncheon engagements and proposals and flowers and adoration. She'd still be in school were she on the other side of the Atlantic, I told my friend. Having her romances maybe, but sub rosa and of the schoolgirl type. Miss 17 lit a cigarette, held it between highly manicured fingers, and regarded her adorer between half-closed lids, with a lift of her very pretty, strong young chin, which seemed to say, I may seem free and easy and emancipated, but don't mistake me. I can take mighty good care of myself, and you must keep your distance. And that's the American flapper, and I take my hat off to her.
Proposed ban on flapper helps keep Florida in news. The Washington Evening Star, May 18, 1925. The effort in the Florida legislature to forbid, under penalty, the designation of any woman as a flapper, though promptly rebuked by the lawmakers, has helped to keep the Gulf state in the news, and has inspired much discussion as to the meaning of the term, and as to the feminine attitude toward its use. The real question is, do the girls in Florida flap? Is the way the problem presents itself to the Charleston Daily Mail. If they flap, why not call them flappers, asks the Charleston editor. So far as can be discovered in this section, there has been no protest from the girls against the term. In fact, they even seem to like it. Nay, some of them may even have a touch of pride in being known as a regular flapper. After a while, the term will die out. It will have its brief little day and disappear. But the girls will go on, bless them, all the same, and look as pretty and be as sweet in 1996 as they were in 1776, or as they are today for that matter. And we have an idea that legislators in 1996 will also be pretty much the same as they are today, with their resolutions and their bills which hard-boiled legislative committees and even the bulk of legislators themselves, having no sentiment, will coldly kill. A gallant legislator's well-meant but futile and ridiculous effort to remove what he deems an opprobrious epithet upon women is the description given by the San Antonio News. The majority realized, this paper adds, that it would do no good to abolish the mere name while the flapper herself remained, and also saw that to ban the latter was beyond the legislator's province and power. That was exercising more acumen than the average legislative body displays. If Florida girls object to the designation flapper, and it is more likely that many glory in it rather, let them abjure the ways and the flippant attitude toward life which the term implies. The young woman who conducts herself with dignity and grace will not suffer from being called a flapper, but by any other name a flapper would be as blithe. The effect of such legislation upon literature is considered by the San Francisco Bulletin, which argues, if a law to such effect is passed, it will make waste paper in Florida, not only of certain dictionaries and a whole library of modern fiction, but also of a number of standard stories. Though its popular use is still comparatively recent, flapper is a word of long standing. As originally employed, it was applied to young girls still wearing their hair flapping down the back and not yet put up. Curiously enough, it was not revived until it had lost its original significance, for it came into vogue about the time that women started bobbing the hair. In point of vulgarity, it does not begin to compare with chicken, but then when Florida starts revising her vocabulary, she may include chicken, peach, pippin, Jane, skirt, frill, and all similar varieties of slanguage in the prohibitions. To the purist, pure language is as important as pure food, but if only the pure in speech are permitted to enter Florida, then what will become of Palm Beach? An open mind as to whether the term is derogatory is indicated by the Martinsburg Journal, which, however, believes that a good many young women resent being called flappers. A young person should not be considered a flapper, states the journal, merely because she is young and pretty. Her ideas of behavior may be of the highest. But there remains a flapper type, who make themselves conspicuous without accomplishing charm. The Dallas Journal, on the other hand, views the matter in an entirely different light, declaring that the term fits like a glove, and that, as it is employed in America, it has no disrespectful meaning. It may be doubted, adds the Dallas paper, that the Florida legislator expresses the desire of many women, since most of them have adopted the styles and manner which have come to represent flapperism. Those who dress and act like a flapper, whether they be young or old, may have little objection to the appellation. The Lafayette Journal refers to the Florida legislator as a moral hero and potential chic, and to his proposal as a momentous though impracticable reform. The Toledo Blade reprovingly remarks that, "If men have become so pitifully ungallant as to make it necessary to have a law to protect women against distasteful designations, then the word female ought to be included in the forbidden list."
Well, you made it to the end of the video, so here's your bonus photo. Wait, you didn't skip to the end of the video just for the bonus photo, did you? Alright, I believe you. Anyway, this is far from the end of flapper content from me. I still have a lot of articles set aside for future videos, and I hope you'll take the time to watch them. Well, that's all for now, all you sheiks and gals out there, but stay tuned for more tales from the Jazz Age.